Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to episode number, 75, I believe, of Circle of Fellows. I'm Shel Holtz. I am Director of Internal Communications at WebCorps. I'm at my office today, so get a look at what a pretty bland office looks like here in Alameda, California. I am an IABC Fellow and the moderator of this panel today. I am joined by a collection of other IABC fellows and good friends who will introduce themselves in just a moment. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. First, if you are watching, you may ask questions in real time because you're watching on YouTube Live and there is a chat feature there and you can just ask a question or share an observation. And I will put it up on the screen and present it to the panelists who will offer their own takes on what you have shared. So we hope that there will be some sharing throughout this panel. Second, if you saw the promotions for this, you probably saw that Mary Hills was also scheduled to be with us. She is unable to be here due to some personal issues that she is facing, and our thoughts are with her and her family, and we look forward to speaking with her on an upcoming panel, future episode of Circle of Fellows. So with that, today we are talking about careers, and your future in focus is the theme for this episode, and we couldn't have a better collection of experts and shall I say, seasoned communication professionals to discuss this. And I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. I'm going to go around clockwise, starting with Brad.
Good day, everyone. My name is Brad Whitworth. I am an IABC fellow, SCMP. On the IABC side of things, I'm serving as a past chair of the Global Communications Certification Council. We'll be talking a little bit more about that throughout the course of this event. And then doing a little bit of freelance work, have been at Hitachi, have been at Hewlett-Packard, have been at Cisco and a few other places. And I'm now helping as a strategic advisor at a company called SMARP out of Helsinki, Finland. And I'm not hearing Shel talk, so maybe it's Amanda's turn to...
It is, in fact, Amanda's turn.
Okay.
So, sorry, I am
Good evening.
Issues, and that just came up.
I am Amanda Hamilton-Attwell from Pretoria, South Africa, and ABC, and I'm also an IBC fellow. All of us are fellows, by the way, and I am the immediate past chair of the Fellow Selection Committee, and my day job is to run an agency, Business DNA. We've been around the block for 20 years, and we do strategic communication work focused on internal publics more than external. I don't understand the external public as well as I understand the internal publics, and I am passionate about helping young people and mid-career people to find their way through their careers.
Great. I'm glad to have you with us as you're experiencing some weather issues where you are, Amanda, and glad you're safe and inside. Neil, you're up.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Shel. Neil Griffiths here. I'm based in the UK. In my day job, I am Global Head of Diversity, Equality and Inclusion for ERM, which is the world's largest sustainability consulting firm. And I've stepped into that role after having spent the better part of 20 years in a variety of communication roles. More recently, like Amanda, focused on the internal side than the external. In IBC terms, I am past chair of what is now the DE&I committee, and vice chair of the Fellow Selection Committee. So I have the pleasure of working with Amanda in that capacity.
Excellent. Can't wait to see who is going to join our ranks in 2022. So last month was an interesting month here in the US. 4.4 million people quit their jobs. That is the largest number of people who have quit their jobs since the US started recording that kind of information. And the research that has been done into that found that most of them quit because they were taking a job elsewhere that either paid better, provided better benefits, was better suited to the lifestyle or the goals that they had set for themselves. In other words, they weren't just quitting over dissatisfaction. They were moving to something better. This is part of a trend that the economists have labeled the Great Resignation, which has been going on for a while. Employees are in the driver's seat right now, as opposed to employers. We're seeing settlements to strikes. John Deere just settled yesterday. The Kaiser strike, I believe, Kaiser Permanente, has been averted. There was a strike planned for university lectures at the University of California that was just averted, all by companies agreeing to the demands for better pay, better wages, better working conditions, and the like. And I think that is very consistent with the theme that we have here today. As people are looking at their careers, communicators are certainly among them. And we'll be talking today about how to go about that and what you can do to position yourself well for a career change or to advance the career that you already have. And I think I'd like to start with just your general observations from the perspective of a communicator with what's going on and your top level thoughts on what communicators can do to position themselves for the most successful career they can possibly have. Who wants to start?
Okay, I shall start.
Thank you, Amanda.
I feel that the best thing that organizations can do, or that communication professionals can do to position themselves, is first of all to develop a career plan early in their lives. But the problem is that when they just leave university, they have this idea what they're going to do and where they're going to go. And then they become involved in this whole turmoil of career development and moving up and down and between organizations. And then suddenly they lose track of their careers, of their career path. And what I would recommend is that they have an annual strategic planning session with themselves to say, this is have a get out clause. So I want to work until then, and then I want to move out at that level. I want to be CEO or director communication for a global organization. I am here now. If I want to progress to that level, what must I do? And then every year, consistently work on your plan and use the career assessment tool to see where you need to focus on to get to where you want to be.
I'd go one step further. I love the idea of having your annual meeting and your annual plan, Amanda, with sort of a review of where you've come from, where you want to go, where are you, what are the steps. I've actually heard of people who put together a board of directors for themselves. 2 or 3 good, close people, perhaps some in the industry, maybe some who aren't in the industry, who can provide some objectivity and ask some tough questions that you might not necessarily ask yourself. So the idea of, on a routine basis, going and looking at that roadmap and that plan. I'm also, one of my observations that I would share would be that it's really scary when people ask me for career advice, because I'm not sure that what worked for me X number of years ago would be the same advice that I would offer today. I also think that it's a very, very individual situation. I think you need to find out what motivates people, what they hope to do, what they aspire to do. And as you pointed out, Amanda, they may have come out of university with an idea, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's what they have to do for the rest of their lives. So I think this idea of something iterative makes a lot of sense. I also remember X number of years ago, the folks at IBM had a whole career path for communications people within a large organizations, where they expected you to spend a certain amount of time in public relations, a certain amount of time in speech writing, a certain amount of time in employee communications, some in community relations, some in philanthropy, to get you that rounded thing. They also wanted you to work in a number of different locations, in the corporate headquarters, in a business unit, in a sales organization, so you could see that. I think that works really well if you want to be in a big organization. I think the other thing we'll have to explore is if you're in a nonprofit organization or you aspire to something else, that model of go inside one place and spend your career there just doesn't make sense.
No.
So I'll chip in as well. I mean, I agree with all of that. I think they're really excellent ideas. Just going back to Shell's sort of positioning in terms of the Great Resignation. I mean, that's absolutely happening here as well in the UK. And you know, I'm sure that there are a number of communication professionals who are making those same decisions right now. Those that are part of trying to tell the story to people who are considering moving somewhere else. I think it's about giving people reasons to stay, isn't it? And so the role is kind of making it hard for people to make that jump. You know, if we're going to do anything to be on the right side of the war for talent, I think it is about making it hard for people to go. And there's an absolute role for the communication team in that, in you know, really drilling into the narrative, that, you know, going back to the purpose, reminding people what's great about the organization, helping people reconnect with that a little bit, because obviously we've been very disconnected over the past 12 to 18 months. So there's lots of, I mean, and we can expand on some of that, I suppose, in this conversation, but I think it's really getting into that that story of what makes the organization great and why it's a great place to build a career.
I had an experience just within the last month or so. I'm part of a two-person team here in my company. The young lady who worked with me, I felt that she has tremendous potential, and I would tell her this in her performance reviews, that one day she could be a vice president of internal communications at a company like an IBM or a Merck or a Hilton or what have you. And I said, look, I don't want to lose you. You're tremendous and you're a great asset to the department and to the company. And we are planning on growing in the department. But if you want to pursue a career in a larger organization, you're going to need experience outside of this company. And a month ago, she told me she was leaving to go to a very large tech company where she is currently the manager of sales communications. So she is working in one of those internal verticals, right? Just working specifically with the sales team and doing internal communications for them. So that's a career path. This is somebody who is determined, yes, I would like to continue to advance and to look at the potential for a career with one of those very large corporations. But not everybody, I think, has that kind of trajectory. They're in a job and seeing where it takes them. Not so much, where does the river flow, but what do I end up liking about what do I do? What do I end up seeing as interesting about what other people in communications are doing here? How does somebody make the decision to set a very specific target? And is that a requirement in order to really put your future in focus?
Shall, if I can respond to that. For me, it is very important, if we look at the career roadmap, we all start at the foundational level, and then you decide to move, and you can move to generalist, specialist level, and many people decide to stay there and enrich their knowledge and their skills and everything within a specific focused area. And I think it's very important that when people plan their careers, that they don't feel that they have to become the vice president, that they can become a specialist in their area, and they can start their own business and be a specialist in a specific area. Because leadership roles in a global corporate is not for every personality. So rather have a career that if you're a specialist, you're comfortable within your specialization area.
I also think that I got a sound piece of counsel one time from a colleague who said, when you're thinking about a move, sort of do one step at a time. He said you could do the same job at a different place, or you could do a different job in the same place. It's sort of hard to do a different job in a different place. So, I mean, some people can make that like two-step change, but sometimes it's an easier thing. I also think that when you talked about coming out of school, Amanda, it's sort of true that many people have an idea what it is that they want to do. Just as school is an opportunity where some people go in knowing exactly what they want. I'm going to be a doctor, and they follow pre-med and they go through and they have these sort of fun steps. You know, there are people who go through and say, I'm going to do this in communications, and they have a very clear idea. School is also a time to find out what it is that you don't want to do. And I think sometimes the same thing is true when you get with an employer. You know, you may have discovered that, ooh, this looks like a really fun thing. And then when you go and do it, it's like, you know, this isn't really something that comes from the heart as well as the brain. And then they start looking for the something else. The question I always ask is it because of the metadata that's surrounding you? Is it you're doing the right thing, but in the wrong place, or you're doing the wrong thing? And that comes from, I think, one of the benefits. You've talked about the IABC career path, and we sort of haven't talked about in detail some of the tools that IABC is providing to be able to help you with some of these decisions. And I know you were very, very active in putting these together. So, let's weave that in. But I think this idea of moving, and, Shell, I also will applaud you for doing what I think a manager should do, which is prepping somebody for that next role, whether it's here with me or somewhere else or outside the organization. And there are many managers who are not as open and who feel threatened if somebody wants to leave. And I think it's a real sign of leadership to be big, say, we'll have you, I can't be selfish. We need to do what's in your best interest.
Yeah, I had very mixed feelings about it. One, I was very sad to lose her. On the other hand, I am looking forward when she is a vice president at a big corporation, saying I had something to do with that. I enjoy mentoring, and I'm starting to do that with her replacement, which was an internal transfer from our proposals department. But I'm not sure everybody knows how to find a mentor in communications. I mean, I sort of raised my hand and said, I'm going to do this. If you're a young communicator in a department where your boss is one of those who feels threatened, as you say, Brad, where do you go to find somebody who's going to spend the time with you and be that kind of guide?
Well, IABC for sure is one place to go, right? And I think I was going to make very similar remarks to Brad about your leadership there, Shell, in that example that you gave, and leadership is absolutely something that you've got to look for as part of your career development. Who is it that you're working with or for? What are they doing to enable you and elevate you? And that sometimes is very hard to find. So some of us are luckier than others in terms of the leaders that we sort of end up with. But that has a massive role to play, I think. So I think it is seeking out those leaders who are going to help you get to the place that you want to be. But going back to how to find a mentor. I struggle with the word mentor because I think it conjures up a certain image of what that is, when actually a mentor can be a friend. It can be somebody that you can bounce an idea or two off. And certainly my experience in IABC has been that we are an international community of such people. I don't think I've ever made a request of somebody that's been refused, either in terms of, hey, can I just talk to you about this? Or have you ever done something along these lines that I might learn from? It's such a generous community. And I'm sure the same is true of other professional associations as well.
Within IABC, I mean, I absolutely agree that IABC is a great resource for a mentor. Pick up the phone and call IABC. I mean, is there a process for identifying somebody within the organization that members could use?
Well, I mean, I can certainly point to the member directory, and I know it works slightly differently now to how I remember it, but there was certainly an indication of who's who, where they are, what they know, so that you can easily kind of filter through a set of sort of people and their related expertise. But sorry, Amanda, I cut you off.
No, that was one of the benefits of the conference and of networking, because by spending time with a person in conversation, you often find a mentor. And I always say to people that you must remember that you mentor a person for a while on a certain thing, and then they will probably move on. Don't expect them to stay with you, and don't fall into the mental trap that you get so close to this person that when you want to leave you feel bad. So that's very important. I think the IABC is perfect for that. But what is also important is that people should distinguish between a mentor and a coach. I always say to people, find a mentor in your profession, find a coach in another profession, just to open the world a little bit more for you, and to make you see other things. So sometimes the mentor role will always include a little bit of coaching, and the coaching role will always include a little bit of mentoring. But the two, for me, this is how I distinguish between the two roles.
We have in IABC the global standard, and I'm hoping we can talk a little bit about how somebody who is planning their career can use the global standard as a roadmap, perhaps, or as a tool to help them on that journey. And Brad, I know that you're intimately familiar with the standard. Do you want to start that?
Certainly. I was going to say the cool thing I think for IABC is that the pieces are coming together and aligning maybe better than they have for a long time. So you have, on the one hand, the global standard, which identifies, in a sense, the blocks of knowledge that one must approach throughout one's career, and everything from ethics beyond. So there's that. Then there's the career path, which sort of says that take these things and go with them. We have now the new book, the IABC Guide, which covers all of those details in chapter after chapter. I think we have something like 25 chapters and 30 contributing authors, some astronomical number. That if you're, I've always said the other thing that you need to do sometime is take that self-test. Like, what is it that I know? What is it that I've mastered? But what is it that I still need to know? And sometimes you can assess that yourself. Sometimes I actually went through that in taking both my accreditation and then the CMP examination certification and then the SCMP certification. The tests that you go through are as much to prove to yourself what it is that you know and learn what it is that you don't know, as it is to prove to the rest of the world what it is that you may have mastered. So I encourage people to sort of look at this framework that exists. These are the kinds of things that are expected of communication professionals around the world. And you think about what's, to me, the most amazing is whether it's the book or the career path or this new career assessment tool that we put together. Some of the brightest minds from around IABC, around the globe, have been involved in putting these things together. So they're not region specific. They're not that they really are as universal as you can get. And then I will throw one more little plug in for the certification side of things. The certification program that we have through the Global Communications Certification Council, GCCC, is the first program to be recognized globally as meeting ISO standards. So if you're looking for something that's a mark that said, I have arrived, I think the idea of a CMP or an SCMP that is going to be recognized globally and carry this ISO certification, which says, you know, these people have a process in place, it's checked out, it works globally. We happen to be in a driver's seat right now with this marvelous program that is a globally recognized one.
Other thoughts on the global standard or certification?
I truly feel that being so involved in the whole process, you know, the assessment tool is actually based on the work of 10 years. It started 10 years ago when we started to develop the global standard and the career roadmap. And so it's not something that we sat one Sunday afternoon and said, we need that. It's really a tested model. It's, you know, global, as Brad said. And what I feel people should do is that, you know, do the test every year and identify the areas where you didn't get the top score. Not even, oh, yeah, I'm okay. But identify the areas where you didn't get the top score and develop a development plan for you on that. And that you feel that you are focused in your development and include that in your career strategy and discuss that with, as Brad suggested, with your directors of your career plan, that you really progress in your development. And for me, what is also important is that you might have mastered something this year, but then there is an explosion of new knowledge in that area that you make sure that you didn't say, well, I'm fine with that. I did that 3 years ago and I was fine. That you realize that there will be changes and that you should continuously look at the different elements in the assessment tool and make sure that you are still on top of them.
Sorry, I mean, I think that there's a lot of people who work in our profession who have ended up there by accident,
did we
or
lose
you know.
the rest?
Oh,
Sorry, what?
I'm online. Is everybody else online?
Go ahead, Neil.
Okay. I got you, Neil.
Okay. You know, so all sorts of people working in this profession who might not necessarily have studied it formally or, you know, had a solid sort of background. And I think that the global standard is a brilliant resource for those people who might be keen to answer the question around what is it that I need here, and you know, what sets me up for success. And all of the things that Amanda and Brad have talked about in terms of the career assessment tool, the certification program, are all excellent tools, I think, for people to really sort of assess and map out a way forward. The one additional point I would make to those that have already been made is that experience and you know, ways of gaining knowledge are not only done in the workplace. And I think that there's a really strong case to be made for volunteering and other opportunities where you can gain experience. And certainly true in my career, that I've done things in my volunteer life that I would have never had the opportunity to do in my professional life. So I think that there's a little bit of sort of an expansion of thinking that helps, because there's lots of opportunities to learn and grow. Imagine you've done what Amanda suggested and you've got your gap analysis. There's lots of ways to fill those gaps, and it's not necessarily just through your paid work.
Yep. Go ahead, Brad.
I was going to say that's a brilliant thing. I think the other piece that I heard is that we are definitely out of the world of one and done. Just because you did something once doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be able to master it, because the world is moving so fast. The technology clearly is moving. Anybody who's gone to one of Shell's presentations or heard him in a webcast on the topic of technology, you realize how so the half-life of your knowledge is getting much, much shorter on a lot of topics. And so it's incumbent upon us. That's actually one of the things that I do like about the new certification program, is it requires you to sort of earn continuing education units by taking classes, reading books, attending conferences and webinars. So this idea of, just because you started doesn't mean that you're all done with it. I guess the other question I would ask you guys is sort of, is the career advice that you give out today the same thing you gave out X number of years ago? Or, while the career path in some ways is a model that stands the test of time, is it the implementation that's different, or are there sort of nuances, or, what are you saying today that you may not have been saying a while ago to people?
That's an interesting question. Before I share my answer, I just want to let those who are watching know, and in fact, those who may be watching the video replay or listening to the podcast, Amanda had let us know that there was a pretty severe thunderstorm going on where she lived. It had already knocked out the tower that she usually relies on for her internet connection. And you may have heard the rumbling of some of the thunder while she was on, and now she has vanished, which tells me that the weather has affected her connection. And hoping she's able to rejoin us, but if not, I'm sure the three of us can carry on. A lot of my advice is still the same as it was. I don't think I've stopped recommending anything that I used to recommend. I believe what I've done is add to it. So it has been additive, following certain resources that didn't exist before. When I got into this business, I don't think it was important to be on top of technology changes, for example. And today you have to be. As a new channel emerges, as a new platform emerges, you have to make the assessment: is my audience here? Is my audience shifting from someplace else to this place? If so, why? What are they doing here? And how can I employ this in order to reach that audience and support the goals and objectives of the organization? When I started in this business, and Brad, I know you were right there with me, it was print and face-to-face pretty much. So you didn't really need to stay on top of print technology. But I gave a keynote presentation yesterday in Bismarck, North Dakota on blockchain to a group of cooperative executives. And, they'd heard the word, but I don't think many of them could articulate exactly what it is and how it's going to affect their business. It was only a couple of years ago that I gave a presentation at IABC where I asked people by show of hands, how many of you had heard of TikTok? And not one hand went up. And you can see how quickly that has become the dominant channel for a lot of messaging and has become very, very influential. So staying current, I think, has become a greater challenge. And I think it's incumbent upon people who are moving along that career path to be able to speak articulately about these channels. If they're hoping to advance their careers, if they don't sound knowledgeable about these things, I think executives who are looking to bring them on board might wonder about their ability to employ the channels that are emerging in support of the organization's strategy.
And building on what you're saying there, Shell, as well, I think that there's the shift that I can see is as we've articulated what it is that we are as a profession, and the fact that we are a profession, and I think that brings with it that responsibility to do that, because if we want to be seen as a profession and professionals practicing what we do, that comes with the baggage, right? It comes with the responsibility to to do all of the things that we say that we're able to do, to know, very much along the lines of what Shell just described. So I think that's probably the shift. There's no getting away with it anymore. We absolutely, if we want to occupy that professional space, we've got to be able to deliver.
Yep.
I would say
And I just want to add one other thing. In addition to the technology, we're seeing more rapid changes in the characteristics of the workforce. For example, the growing expectation that people have for their employer to be purposeful. We're seeing a lot of research that demonstrates these shifts, and I think we have to be on top of those too. When I started in my career, you didn't see those massive shifts happening every 18 months. People came to work. They wanted to do a good job. They wanted to know what was going on in the organization. They wanted to make a good salary and go home to their families at the end of the day. And that was pretty much it. But there are more expectations, and those expectations shift, consistent, I think, with a lot of societal trends. So being aware of those, both for internal and external communications, understanding the priorities of the audience can change a lot. So I didn't mean to interrupt you, Brad.
No, I was going to say the other thing that if I sort of look back to what kind of counsel I may have provided to someone at a career day, if they were thinking of a career in communications, and what I say today, probably the biggest change is the notion that you need to master measurement. Angie Sinicus, who's another IABC fellow, would probably embrace all of us and love us for that. But before you could get by with just doing stuff, whether it was that face-to-face meeting or, you check it off because I got it done. I got the thing out the door. It got into the hands of the audience, and we sort of washed our hands with it. The nice thing is that IABC's Gold Quill program, the Silver Quill programs, I think everybody is now, show me how you moved the needle. What were you trying to accomplish? What was the business purpose that you were trying to help solve? Show me the numbers at the end. And so maybe, I say, if you're talking to somebody who's getting ready to go to school or in school, have them not take pure liberal arts, but also put in there some business and some measurement and some statistics kinds of classes. I went back and did the MBA, sort of a class a quarter for what seemed like forever, to be able to master some of those business skills that included measurement and evaluation and proof. The other one that I find myself sort of offering up to people just in terms of general career advice is that we need to learn how, as communications people, to be better salespeople. I think if I go back to sort of my schooling and training in journalism, we were never to have a dog in the fight. It's like you find this person and you find that person, and it's those two people, and you're sort of an objective third party impartial observer of things. When you get into the corporate world, if somebody comes to you and says, we need to slash your budget by 10% because everybody's doing it, you need to be able to, one, have the metrics to prove that that's an insane idea, and two, sort of the wherewithal to be able to make your case and to sell your ideas and your programs. So I'm giving some slightly different counsel that I may have X number of years ago, and a lot of it is around that you're not just a communications person. If you choose to practice in pretty much any organization, you'd better have some business skills, some savvy, some organizational skills to be able to navigate, because that's where the future is. And it's something that wasn't expected of us, but is now.
Before I ask my question, we have about 20 minutes left, and I want to invite those who are watching live to ask any questions or share any observations or experiences in YouTube. Just use the chat feature, and I'll project that up onto the screen and get some feedback from Brad and Neil. The current issue of the Harvard Business Review has an article I am in the middle of reading. My plane landed before I could finish it last night. But it's fascinating. It suggests that when somebody moves into a new role in the organization, it is incumbent upon the organization, in order to help that person succeed, to help them build their networks. They talk about those employees who either join the organization, having networking as part of the onboarding process, or people who are moving into a new role within the organization, building out their networks. It goes into detail about different kinds of networks and the kind of people that you want to build those relationships with, and it gives some very, I think, very useful case studies. But how important is it for communicators moving into either a new job with a new employer or a new job with an existing employer to network internally and externally in order to help advance that career?
I'll chip in, Brad. Yeah, I mean, I think it's that idea of setting people up for success, right? And for giving them what it is that they need, and not leaving them to their own devices as such. And I think that there's a lot of truth in that, and I think that there's a lot of there's a need to certainly lay some foundations for people to then go and make something of, right? It's impossible for somebody that's just joining an organization to know exactly who's who and where to go and how to go about it. And from a communication professional's perspective, it really is about understanding the who's who and the audiences and the influencers and so on. So I think it's doubly important, the networking piece from a communication professional's perspective.
I think we do some of that naturally in our jobs. I mean, we sort of find out who's in the know and sort of those informal social influencers inside organizations. And I think increasingly it's expected of us to know who those same people are in the outside world as well. The people who follow an organization, not necessarily securities analysts, but in this new world where it's some fuzzier roles. I think as communications people, we're pretty good at that. However, I do wholly subscribe to what it is that you said in the article, Shell, that you need all the help you can get early on. It's I think somebody should give you, your immediate manager or someone else, here are some of the key people that you need to meet, and I'll help you by sending a note to all of them and introducing you. I think the other piece that I always find sort of like it's been great talking to you. I've learned so much. Who else would you think that I could benefit from? So you start to build your own network just by those references. And after you've exhausted it and people start naming the same names, you can feel as if you've done a pretty good job. I think the other piece that I keep going back to is these networks are dynamic. And if we're seeing that great resignation and people leaving the organization more frequently, it's sort of, you have to rebuild this thing on a regular basis. You just can't, again, sort of the one and done. I've met those people, I'm taken care of, I know that organization. No, things change. I think the other piece that we as communications people can do so well is show an immense curiosity in what it is that they do and understand their goals and come in and show how our organization, our role can help support them in accomplishing their goals. As opposed to, I'm the new kid in town, I'm the communications person, you need to come to me to do this, because I control this, and this. Turn that equation upside down and show how you are adding value to their organization, their structure, their people, their team, helping them accomplish what it is that they need to do.
Right. One of the things that really intrigued me in this article is the idea of institutionalizing network as part of the onboarding process. And I'm going to be talking to my HR people about that, as well as our recruiting people who are in possession of the onboarding process. Brad, you were talking about the need to understand business and to be a strategic partner in the organization as a communicator to deliver results that support the organization's business goals, outcomes rather than outputs. One important way to look at that. And certainly there are a lot of organizations that expect that from their communicators. But there is the flip side with communicators who would like to be delivering strategic results to the organization, but leadership that says, no, I just want you to send these messages, maintain the website, write feature articles, produce cool videos, and leave the business to us. They just don't see communications as strategic. And that can be a hindrance to your career plans if you're not able to get the experience contributing strategically to the organization. Neil, I wonder if you have any advice or any thoughts on how somebody can address an organization's leadership that doesn't see the function strategically.
Yeah, and I think that's the situation that many of us find ourselves in. That I often reflect and talk to people, in fact, who find themselves in that type of an organization. And my advice is, there's usually one person that will be a sympathetic ear. So find that person and start there. There is always one, and it's better if that's a senior leader, and you can work with them and start to expand out. But if you find yourself in that situation where no one's listening, no one cares, I don't think it's the end for you. I think there's many people that would not want to put up with that, and they'd probably choose to go somewhere else. But I think that you can practice the way that we know is the best way and the strategic way, the way that we that in all that we celebrate through Gold Quill and so on. You can be that communication professional without having to ask permission. Just do it anyway, right? No, you don't need to have to show a communication plan to anybody. You can just do that for yourself and know that you're doing it according to the book. So I think that's often my advice. Find the one person that can start to open the doors for you, and if there's no one, just do it anyway.
It's a tough role. I think some of the other part is if you're coming in brand new into an organization or into the profession, you don't necessarily have the internal credibility / self-confidence because you haven't experienced that. Some of that is a maturation. That's why things like an internship, if you are in school and considering, is so valuable, because you do have some of that real world experience. I think the more experience you can get, I think the other piece I always say is that some of those senior leaders who may be reluctant, they will change for one of two reasons. One is you can appeal to the logic. Maybe when the organization grows up, they want it to become a this. We'll find out who they look at as role models for their own organization, find out what those people are doing, and bring that back and say, if we really want to become a that, here are some of the steps that we need to take in communications to fulfill that goal. The other is that they're pressured into it. Their backs up against the wall. There's some sort of a crisis going on. And those are opportunities for communications people to shine. There are so few opportunities, I think, for us. One is either that drip, drip, drip. We can win people over with time and some logic and some great examples, or in a crisis, in a tight mode, we're the ones who can come through because we're deadline focused, we're action oriented, we're scanning the horizon, we see all these audiences, and we can put together things faster than the people in goodness knows what other part of the organization.
Yeah, when I first started here, the internal communications function was brand spanking new. And this is an organization made up primarily of engineers who really couldn't figure out this squishy idea of communication. It is not a very linear, you do this first, you do this next, you do this next, and when you're done, you've engineered something. So I developed a presentation that I took to, for example, the operations leadership group. And I said, look, here's what communication is, and here's what this department can do for you. Sending messages It has to happen, obviously, if we need to get a message out to people. We're here to do that, but that's not at the heart of the function, right? We're here to drive change and support objectives and to address issues and challenges. And I just kept hammering at that, and now they're calling, right? 4 years later, they're sending emails or picking up the phone and saying, here's a challenge. I think it's a communication challenge. How can you help? So it's not something you turn around on a dime. It's something you chip away at. And the key way is demonstrate it, get a few wins where you have helped them with something that is more strategic in nature, that is more along the lines of operationalizing communication or using communication to address an issue, say silos where information doesn't move between those silos. And they can see that, if you can help with that, you can probably help with this.
Yeah, one of our IABC fellows, Jim Schaefer, whenever you hear him discuss how one can prove one's value, it always tends to be at that operational frontline position. And I think sometimes if you're called in to do corporate communications, you're plugged into the ivory tower and the top executives, you forget that there is that driving need at that front line. And that's where the action takes place. It's where customers and employees actually come together. And sometimes we can be far removed from it. So it's up to us. It's incumbent upon us to understand the entire organization and not get so tied up into the, if I get this senior level top down stuff out to everyone, I've done my job, because it's a lot more complex. The model is, extraordinarily fuzzy. Not that it ever was that clear, but I think one of the other things that I've seen, the change in the organization and sort of the incumbent necessary change in all of us, is to see the gray and to find ways to connect the dots, whether it's in measurement or with people. And as you point, Shell, you've got silos where communications is not happening. We can be the analyst to look at sort of that entire communications environment and not just narrowly, I'm putting the word out from the top execs, therefore my work is done here.
Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of communicators, particularly internal communicators, can take advantage of is that this is one of the few functions that has its fingers in every part of the organization. We see everything that's going on and can maybe make connections based on those observations that people who are just working within one of those areas of the company all the time can't see.
Yeah. And that could be as simple as advising not to do something because the one example I always think of is sort of celebrating excellent organizational performance at the same time that we're letting people go. So maybe that news is not going to land exactly how you thought it was going to amongst that group. And I think that that's one of the roles that we can play in that regard with that sort of organizational view that you described there, Shell. And I agree. For me, it all comes back to the measurement piece that Brad talked about so well before. And to anybody that is really still trying to figure out how do I elevate the position and the role of communication within the organization, it's the measurement piece that for me over the years is the bit that has grabbed the attention.
Yeah. I also think there's an incumbent part upon all of us too to push a little bit more and be a little bit bolder and maybe sell a little bit, as you demonstrated in your example, Shell, because in years past, maybe it was that assertiveness was not necessarily a becoming trait. And I don't think communications people, we preferred often to toil in the background in anonymity. Our work stood for itself. The beauty of the work was just, like, ooh, this is good stuff. People will recognize how great our stuff is. And I think what we need to do is turn that around a little bit and be a little bit bolder with our self-promotion of the stuff. And that's where, if you win an IABC Gold Quill, find ways to celebrate that and have others celebrate it. And the best is to have that champion pat you on the back and find ways to, even if you have to make that stuff happen. But, I think being a little bit more of the salesperson with your ideas and your concepts and your programs, so that you just don't wait to be discovered, because you could be waiting a long time in busy organizations.
Does it make any sense to find other people at the same level you are, maybe in other organizations, and form a group, a peer group, where you can share a peer, where you can share ideas and observations and challenges, get advice, maybe just unburden yourself of your frustrations. And have either of you done that in your career?
Probably more informally than the way that you describe it, Shell. And I think that's also part of the value of going to events and networking events and things like that, because what I've often found is that when I'm feeling a little bit low about something that's a project I'm working on, maybe I haven't been able to do it as effectively as I might if I had a bit more budget or more people working on the project, and you sort of have those conversations with people, and what you realize is actually you're not that much further behind the majority of people that you talk to. There's many other people in similar situations, and I think that can be quite reassuring, because it's easy when you're toiling, I love that word, that you sort of think that it's just you in that scenario, and everybody else is got bells and whistles, and it's all going really swimmingly. So I think it's a really good idea to check in, however you do that, on a regular basis.
And I think you hit upon another one, Shell, which is the sort of build the sort of situation-specific network and networking that you need. Because if you're facing, we want to roll out some new technology, you may want to go talk to people who have recently introduced technology and have been successful for it, all that sort of stuff. If you, want to learn a little bit more about, the industry in which you are working and you're new, the crowd that you may want to pull together are not even necessarily people in your neighborhood. They may be thousands of miles away at leading companies that are great. When I was working for an insurance company in the middle of the state of Illinois, Hartford, Connecticut is like the insurance capital of the world, and at least in the United States. And making friends with the people who worked for the bigs in Hartford was an IABC network that I put together specifically to be able to bring myself up to speed with what some of the biggest and brightest and best were doing in the wonderfully huge, well-resourced organizations, with ideas that I could bring into this much smaller, more intimate organization based in the central part of Illinois. So build the network that helps you accomplish what it is that you need to have done.
We have just a minute or two left, and I do need to let everybody know what's coming up next month. But I did want to get one more thought out there. How important is it to volunteer? I've always said that my career started to really gain steam when I started volunteering with IABC. And of course, IABC would be my pitch to people, but it can be, a local nonprofit that's not communications related. It's gaining that experience and building that network. Is that important to career development in general?
I would have to say yes, an enthusiastic yes. I think that I've always said sort of two things. One is that you'll get some leadership opportunities within a nonprofit a whole lot sooner than you do in the place that you're getting paid to do something. So, embrace those opportunities to learn how to motivate, how to delegate, how to manage a program, whether it's the, professional development programming, becoming the treasurer for an organization, doing the communications for somebody in a nonprofit. I think the other piece that goes with that is that, I hate to say this, if you stumble, if you should foul up in doing so, it's a whole lot less career threatening to do so in a nonprofit and a volunteer role. It's a great place to practice and learn lessons before you have to put them to work in a place where you're getting paid for doing so, and maybe perfection is expected.
I agree with everything that Brad said, Shell.
Excellent, because we are out of time. I appreciate that, Neil. I do want to let everyone know that episode 76 is scheduled for Thursday, December 16th at noon Eastern Time. The panelists will be Alice Brink, Martha Muzichka, Letitia Narvaez, and Mark Schumann talking about the health of your organization's culture and how you can get it to get well if it's not. So look forward to seeing everybody then. Thank you both. Thank you also to Amanda, who suffered that weather-related issue, act of God, I suppose. And as always, thank you to Anna Willie for all of the behind-the-scenes work in making sure that these sessions come off every month. So look forward to seeing you all next month, everyone. Thanks very much.
Thanks to you,
Bye
Shell.
all.